Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening on a very wet evening. We did not plan this for the first really official night after the clocks changed, so congratulations, it is evening. Before we get underway, I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered here on the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. For their contributions and their dedication to building an environment here for all of us to live, work, and play, we remain eternally grateful. For those of you joining us online, I encourage you to think about the places and learn about the places where you are from and the people that guide and protect those lands. Before we go any further this evening, I have a number of people that I would like to thank for helping this event come to be. First off, the Institute for Healthy Living and Chronic Disease Prevention, the West Coast Women Engineering, Science and Technology, the Office of the Vice President Research, UBCO, UBC Athletics and Recreation, the Faculty of Health and Social Development. Most importantly, thank you to the staff that worked behind the scenes to put this all together. Without further ado, what you're really here to hear is four amazing people that I am very grateful and happy to have gotten to know over the last few days or have known for many years. We're going to start with Mel Spooner, who's the host this evening. Mel Spooner is a local coach, entrepreneur, Ironman or Iron Woman champion. She holds 3 world titles, a 4th place finish at the World Championships in Kona, Hawaii. She is an entrepreneur, a coach, and instrumental in community building for sport here in the Okanagan. Mel?
I'm on. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Jen. I'm not too sure how often you think of shoelaces. I'll be honest, I actually do quite a bit. I spend 2 days a week working at the local running store in Vernon called the Starting Block. And I see daily the significance they make when you have to make something that is generic, more personal and specific. When I was asked to do this, yes, I Google. So I Googled lace up, and I found this. Slip-ons are all about a comfortable fit, convenience, and ease. Slide them on and go. No laces required. On the other hand, lace-ups offer an adjustable, secure fit, making them perfect for any activity where stability is key. Tonight is not about stories of convenience and ease, but rather tonight is about when stability is required in times when things are constantly changing and shifting around us. Being able to adjust to ensure a secure fit. We are not a steel structural bridge meant to withstand the same demands over and over, but rather we are dynamic women with goals that ebb and flow as our lives change around us. With a correct lacing system, it will appear that the activity is easy, but the activity still has its demands. It is the foundation of lacing up that allow us to explore, accept challenges, and quite simply go for it and start the process. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. May I introduce you? Instruction and
Not used to using the mic. Am I in the right place? As Mel said, I'm from Nottingham Trent University, all the way in the United Kingdom. So thank you very much to Jen for the invitation to talk to you all tonight, and amazing to see so many great faces. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of, I suppose, my story as to how I've made it to be an associate professor, whilst also balancing my athletic career. The underlying theme I often talk about within these kinds of talks is that it's definitely a tale of two halves. So there really is a sort of a knack to trying to balance these two avenues, but they definitely influence one another. So there's things that I've experienced as an athlete that has determined kind of what I want to research. And then similarly, things that I do learn through my research have influenced what I've done in my athletic career. So I hope to give you a little bit of an overview into that story so far. So my athletic endeavours first began, say, when I was 16, which is many, many years ago now. And I first qualified to run for Great Britain in the cross country. So we have a European cross country event that is every year, and it's really quite fun, and it gave me like the first exposure into what international competition was and that professional running was a thing. I think Mo Farah was actually in the senior team that year, so it is a real good stepping stone into international athletics. So from there, I was definitely determined this is something that I wanted to pursue. And it really underpinned where I went to study university, what I studied at university and where I went. So in the UK, there's a university called Loughborough University, which is kind of where you're meant to go if you want to do any kind of sport. So not just running, but all the sports. And this has been quite historic in developing many, many Olympic medalists and champions. So that was where I went. I didn't really care what I studied at the time, but that was where I was going to go. And actually, I suffered my first injury as well on the way to there. And I'll come back to that a bit later, but I did suffer my first stress fracture. So that was an experience. However, a big life lesson I learned at Loughborough University was that I didn't really like it. I didn't like the fact that everybody was the same. Everybody wore shorts and flip-flops, and everybody was wearing some kind of sport. And I did not want to talk about sport for 24/7. Like, I love sport, but I really needed a break from it. And that is something that I have kind of hung on to for the rest of my career. I really, really like the fact that I've tried to balance like almost full-time work most of the time, because I need that kind of break. Like, whilst I'm really, really invested in all of my training, will give my utmost to it, I like to kind of put it to one side and move to something else. So that's what I did. And I moved home and I went to study anatomy at University of Manchester. And there, the population of people I was with was so diverse. And if I said to them, I've been for a run this morning, they really couldn't care less. So it was really perfect. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I was still trying to pursue my running, like developing in the distances, but I was still sort of struggling with a lot of bone injuries in particular as an evolving female athlete. After my university degree as an undergrad, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do, as I think probably we can all relate to. So I prolonged my academic career and went to do a master's at Manchester Metropolitan just down the road. And I did that part-time, so I did it over 2 years while I had a few jobs. And I kind of transitioned then into the senior ranks and went back to qualify for the European cross-country champs. And as an under 23, I actually won. So it was really nice to go back, albeit 6 years later. But through this transition into like the senior ranks, I did suffer quite a few bone injuries. And that then really determined what I wanted to do in my introduction to the research world. So I wanted to understand what was going on in like bone metabolism and why females were sort of a bit more prone to bone injuries. No one really spoke to me when I was diagnosed with my injuries, like the links between the menstrual cycle and our bone health. And no one really said the word like female athlete triad. So the links that your menstrual cycle governs a lot of the hormones that are responsible for your bone health. And if you don't have those hormones through a menstrual cycle, then your bones suffer, which is kind of what was going on with me. But no, it was always after the effect, after the issue had happened, was when these things were brought up. So I went into my master's thinking I was going to cure the female athlete triad and answer everybody's problems. But now I know that doesn't quite work in research. But I did have my sort of a whistle-stop tour of how to do research, what our project looks like, and eventually we did publish some of that work. And that really gave me a really nice insight into the academic sense and how I could bring my interest from my athletic background into like the research perspective. Then, whilst sort of doing that and transitioning into full-time work as a research assistant, I definitely progressed in my running. 2015 was a really great year. I kind of progressed a lot over the roads and the track, and I did my first half marathon with a view to trying to qualify for the 2016 Olympics in the marathon. That was kind of on track until I got to 30K and tore my plantar fascia. So then the 2016 Olympics didn't quite happen for me, but I was still definitely trying. So then instead of an Olympic dream, I had a PhD dream. And I went on to do a PhD, this time looking at musculoskeletal health in older people. So looking at how we can utilize exercise to really prevent the sort of losses that are inevitable in aging and what is happening really between the muscle and the bone, how they kind of talk to one another when we're doing this exercise and why it's useful. So I did a lot of kind of work in bone density, body composition, but also did a lot of cell and molecular biology, which was interesting, but something I didn't really then want to pursue further, but definitely gave me a good standing to then pursue my research career even further. So from there, I actually got a full-time position as a lecturer at the university I'm at now, and this was in 2018. And through my PhD, I tried to still progress in my running. It kind of was there, but then I was always suffering with a few injuries. So 2018 and starting this new job role gave me like a fresh start in both areas, like research and my athletic sense. So I was really adamant that I wanted to put the job first and I would just kind of do training because that's what I enjoyed. If that kind of came to fruition and got me to where I wanted to go, then that would be great. If it didn't matter. I was doing it because I wanted to do it. And actually, I started that job in June 2018. And 6 months later, I was back on the cross-country team for Great Britain. So 6 years later, after winning, I went back and was kind of back on the international circuit while juggling this full-time position as a lecturer. But it kind of then goes back to like my early sort of experiences that if I'm kind of happy balancing my academic work and my research, then my running kind of came together. So 2019 was then the year we was kind of working towards for a long, long time, and everything kind of started to click in my running. I captained the World Cross Country team for Great Britain. That was a really nice honor. Most of the captains in the cross-country world and athletic sense aren't really used to doing presentations. So when they gave me the opportunity to, I was all for it because that was kind of what I did on a day-to-day basis. I then went altitude training with a really good group. We went to Flagstaff in Arizona. That was a lot of good fun. I won an international half marathon and eventually finished that year running 2:25 for the marathon. And at the time, the qualification standards for the Olympics that were due to be in 2020 was 2:29:30. And I managed to surpass that by 4 minutes, kind of accidentally. And this time actually then ended up qualifying me for the Tokyo Olympic Games. So as Mel mentioned earlier, the Tokyo Olympics ended up being in 2021. So it was a long time till we actually got there. And I'm sure Melindy, you'll allude to this. It was quite a different experience. This is my only Olympics I've been to. And we weren't even in Tokyo, were we? We were all the way in Sapporo, which was very, very questionable. It was meant to be cooler, but it definitely wasn't cool. We had this kind of place to run round, didn't we? That was 800 meters long. If you went one way, it was uphill. And if you went the other way, it was downhill. And that was the only option for training. So it was bizarre. But, you know, I did the race. I didn't perform well. I think I must have finished about 30 minutes after Melindy. I was quite poorly on the actual day, and I ended up trying to get round with this ambulance following me round till I actually crossed the finish line and kind of went into the war zone at the end. It was the medical tent. But I finished, and I am an Olympian. So it was a good experience in that sense. Thanks. So coming off the Olympics, despite me not like performing on the day, I did actually then kind of get a momentum, and from 2021 all the way to like summer 22, I had some really great experiences and managed to run the fastest times I never thought I would ever complete, really. So I ran a 10K PB, my half marathon PB. I ran another marathon in the start of 2020 at Seville and ran 2 hours, 22 minutes, which at the now is the fourth fastest time ever for a British marathoner. And I competed in the World Championships that following summer. So it gave me a really good momentum coming off the Olympics. There was probably a bit of a downtime coming off it, but then managed to utilize my fitness and put it to good use. So that was a really great experience. Throughout this time, I was still trying to balance my academic career. And by starting out as a lecturer, kind of as a lead principal investigator, so being able to like lead your own research projects, I was able to kind of go back to the things that brought me into academia in the first place. So what I really wanted to do was to try and understand what is it that our female sex hormones are doing within the body, basically. And an area that we wanted to look into was an area like neuromuscular function, so how our nerves link to our muscles. And the reason for that is because the female sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, kind of regulate the nervous system. So estrogen is what we call excitatory, so kind of turns things on, whereas progesterone is inhibitory and turns it off. So they kind of remain in balance and allow things to stabilize. And we can utilize a female menstrual cycle because we have like fluctuations in our hormones within one individual to really understand what it is that these hormones do. So if you've got an individual at a menses phase where the hormones are low, we can understand how the body works in that environment. In comparison to, say, like the luteal phase where the progesterone is high, we can try and understand what happens there. And we were able to like do the research project I really wanted to do for a long, long time using intramuscular electromyography. So looking within the muscle and measuring the different electrical activity there. And we actually saw that during the luteal phase, the signals released from the brain to the muscle are reduced significantly at a very low level of contraction. So when you're doing like just 10% of your maximum, there is a reduction in what we would call the firing rate across the menstrual cycle. And this kind of lined up with some of our now collaborators as well, where they see greater amounts of inhibition in the luteal phase as well, where progesterone is high. So this really sort of drove our interest to try and understand what's happening with the menstrual cycle a little bit further. And historically in research, we do have a lack of female physiology data. So way back when sort of physiology research became a thing, people omitted female data altogether from female participants from their data sets altogether, generally because it was deemed to be harder, because we do have these hormonal fluctuations. So we just didn't go there. So now there is a real need to add to that data, and we need to add good data as well, not just kind of the ad hoc things. So studying females is quite difficult because we do have to think about the menstrual cycle, which in a research sense can be quite expensive and time consuming. But that's not to say we can't do the best possible with what we've got, basically. So there are ways around it, but it just highlights the importance and the need to do more research in this area. So one of the ways we're trying to do that now and trying to address some of the barriers is kind of like cross-site data collect. So we might have the same methods in a number of different institutes, and we would then pool our data together to make sure that we have bigger sample sizes. So we can see here, I'm not going to go into the details of these like specific measurements, but they are elements of the neuromuscular system. And you can see that there are changes here. However, when we look at some other data that's done from my own PhD student, we're looking at measures of force control. There is no significant difference. So there's still a lot to be answered with regards to the menstrual cycle and performance. But I think there's two things that I like to highlight here is that there are clear individual responses. So everybody is very, very different in how they might change across a menstrual cycle. And also we need to acknowledge how people perceive their menstrual cycle to affect performance. So if one person might actually feel horrendous at any one time point, but in the lab setting where it's all controlled, they don't necessarily produce the results we think, that doesn't mean to say their feeling isn't going to affect something. So we do have enough information now to be able to support female athletes and females to be physically active. So it's kind of coming up with a happy medium between the two. There's also an element that we've now started to look into, and that's the menopause. So given what we know progesterone and estrogen do, and how females go through a menopause and their levels of hormones change, means that we might see differences in aging between males and females. And males and females do age differently. So females live longer than males, but spend more time in poorer health. And one of the reasons for that might be because of these hormonal changes we experience through the menopause. So some of our work now is trying to look at the neuromuscular aspects of the menopause to see if we do see any of these changes occurring. So some of our preliminary data that is definitely ongoing does actually indicate that the use of HRT, so here we can see there are some basically mitigations of the losses that we might experience. So this is measuring like the brain response to a stimuli, for want of a better explanation. So we can stimulate the brain, and if you're young and healthy, then you kind of get a good reaction. Whereas if we get older, this like diminishes. But the use of HRT actually dampens that, allows that response to be saved a little bit. So it kind of demonstrates the loss of hormones through the menopause does kind of mean the brain isn't as responsive. So it indicates there might be something happening in the menopause for females and why we then get so many symptoms. When we've looked at other data, looking at, say, how our muscles work, we're not actually seeing any differences at the moment, but there's so much more to delve into here. And this isn't quite finished yet, but we need to look at like different types of contractions and different levels as well. However, I've had this conversation with Jen a little bit. We've started to actually speak to these females. Like we can do a lot of lab research, which is great and really interesting. But when we speak to them, the menopause is a real thing that's affecting them now. So we as researchers need to acknowledge that and be able to use the information that we have now to support the females as best we can, whilst we still try to understand the mechanisms behind that. So it doesn't mean that we can't do something about it now and try and support females and help them remain active, whilst we're also doing the lab research and evolving that side of things. And finally, as for myself and my own running career, my consistent streak did come to a grinding halt at the end of 2022. And I actually had surgery to repair my hamstring falling off my bone in 23. And that worked for a little bit of time, but unfortunately, I have just recently announced my retirement. But that does mean I can come to Canada, do fun things like wine tasting and giving a tour and speaking to all of you lovely people today. So it's not all bad. So thank you very much. That's me just doing some exercise. And I'll happily take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. What a great story. And now we get to continue on this journey of lacing up for life. And I would like to introduce you to Melindy Elmore. I first met Melindy when I was facilitating a triathlon community coaching course here in Kelowna. She established this was 12 years ago. She has much better memory than I. I have 10 to 15 years written on my notes. So 12 years ago. And when I do these, I never really know who's going to show up. It's a community level certification, but normally you don't get a past Olympian. And it was an absolute treat to have her be part of that weekend, and then to see her pursue yet another Olympic dream. Melindy has represented Canada in the Olympics in 2004, 2020, and 2024. She has recorded a sub 9-hour Ironman and has acquired 3 degrees while pursuing elite sport. Currently, she is the head coach of the UBCO Heat Program. And so I am very honored to introduce to you Melindy as she shares with us her story for lacing up for life.
Hi, nice to see so many of you out here today, and very cool to finally meet Jess. So we've overlapped before in races, but I think this is the closest we've actually come to having a real conversation. So boy, there's so much information that Jess and researchers in the world of female athletics, high performance sport, everything related to women physiology is finally pursuing. It's taken years, I think, right? And I'm totally going off script already, but when I had my first child 10 years ago now, I remember I still wanted to be an athlete, and I came here to the university, to the library, and I sat down at the computer and I searched, how to train while pregnant for return to sport, and nothing. And we're only now, I've been engaged in a few focus groups and research to also deal with how can women come back from sport, how can you train through pregnancy, et cetera, all these things. And 10 years ago, there was literally nothing. And there, until now, really, even like Just said, physiology and research has been predominantly on males. So thank you for the work you're doing. So back to, what I'm supposed to talk about. And I'm going to be way less sciencey because I have social sciences degrees and I love science, but my brain doesn't do statistics very well. So I'm a little bit more of the art side than the science side. Just kind of background. We already went through the background. It's okay. Kind of like Jessica, I had, grew up aspiring to run in the Olympics for a long time and had this love of sport and love of movement and love of dreaming big. And I think one of the things that led me to today and being in high performance sport now for 25 years is the fact that there is joy in what you do, or joy in what I do, and hopefully joy in what you do, and that you have to really love what you're doing. And so for me, that's always been the underpinning, and that doesn't mean every day is great. Like today was kind of cold and rainy, and we get spoiled in the Okanagan, but overall the process has to be really what drives you and not just the results. So the dream is there, but it's the day-to-day that makes it happen. I was I have this picture here of my sister and I, the two little girls in the corner, of the first time that I heard of the marathon, and that was in 1984. And I was 4, and my sister was 2. And after Joan Benoit Samuelson won the Olympics in LA, I started racing my sister to bed. And that was the beginning of it. And then, join the track club. That's the Apple Bowl for those of you from Kelowna in the bottom right, back when it was an asphalt track. And that I was in about high school when I thought, I am an Olympian, although I was not at that point, but I like to think of myself as I am a future Olympian. Therefore, what do I have to do to make this happen? And so it was kind of that dream early on that sort of as a guided a lot of my decisions and a lot of key moments that that came over the next 8-10 years to make it happen. So I'm going to skip ahead. I had, like Jess, a lot of injuries and several stress fractures as well back then. The concept of REDS, reduced energy deficit syndrome, is that the acronym? Was not very well known, a connection between fueling and training and that sort of thing. And I found myself with several bone injuries in my late teens, early 20s. Those were hard years. And I remember at one point thinking, well, do I quit or do I keep going? And again, thinking back to that little girl who had a big dream, I realized that if I quit, then it was over. So if you give up on yourself, then there's no point in having the dream anymore. And thankfully, things did come together in 2003, 2004, no injuries, lots of great racing, and I realized my dream of representing Canada, making the Olympic team and going to Athens. So I ran the 1500 then, so back when I was a sprinter. And my hamstrings would definitely not be attached to my body anymore if I was running the 1500. And the Olympics is so hard to explain, but and my 3 Olympic experiences have all been so different from each other. But a stadium Olympics in the track and field, sport of track and field, is just mind-boggling. You have 80,000 people in a stadium, so much noise, so much energy, so much pressure. And in my particular race, I had the woman from the UK who ended up winning the whole Olympics. Kelly Holmes, who was a massive star at the time, and the representative from Greece in my heat. So the stadium was so incredibly electric and so incredibly loud that that's pretty much all I remember, is just how loud it was. And I unfortunately finished my heat and didn't make it through to the finals and was pretty devastated. And I just thought, well, okay, I have to come back. I have to learn from this, and I'll be back in 4 years from now. Unfortunately, so this is kind of where, skip ahead, it took me 17 years to get back. So lots of life happens in 17 years, but I came back not as a 1500 meter runner, not in the stadium, but as a marathoner. And as just mentioned, Tokyo Sapporo was also a unique experience during the middle of COVID. I'll rewind in a moment to some of the stuff that happened in the 17 years in between that was the connection that got me there. And then most recently, of course, this past summer was the Paris Olympics. Quite likely my last Olympics. Never say never, but I feel very rewarded and grateful for these opportunities, and the work that it takes to get there is significant, and I'm still enjoying running and training and racing, but also loving doing other things, and Jess alludes to that balance and those demands. So I need to keep an eye on time here, right? Because we've got like 15 minutes. I've probably already used 12. So I had some, there's been ups and downs, and there's always ups and downs in sport and life, but between 2004 and 2008 was really rocky, and injuries and good performances, and found myself at the Olympic trials in 2012, actually 0.07 seconds off of the time that I needed to make it on the Olympic team. And I was out of chances. I had flown around the world. I had gone to Morocco and Jamaica and Dubai, and I don't even know where else. Norway. I had flown everywhere to get into races. And for some reason, I just didn't put it all together. And I was standing on the start line, or I was at national championships, and I just felt like quitting. And I was so done with the year, and I had to still perform at national championships, which was the Olympic trials. And my husband said to me, when I said, I don't know if I have it in me to race today, and he said, well, sport builds character, but sport also reveals character. Like, I have to race, don't I? And that just kept coming back to me over all these years, because now I think I'm at the point where I want to make decisions and do things that reflect character and values, and not just the result, and not just I don't know, not the pressure that you feel from external sources to perform. It's like, what are you trying to do in the pursuit of your goals? So I ran the race. I won the race, so that was good. It was the Olympic trials, and I stepped off the track, and that was the last time I ever ran the 1500 in spikes on the track. I was done. But I got my 5-minute warning. I got to speed up here. That experience really led me to do some internal looking and also some reading about what happens when you're really results driven. And I realized that I had been so results driven for so long that when you become obsessed with the goal and you become obsessed with the result, and when the only thing that matters is that outcome, is that you lose sight of what the process is that you need to get there, and you can no longer control everything, and you're just get to a state of being burnt out, really, and anxiety and that sort of thing. So I was kind of in that spot where I realized that I was no longer doing things for the right decisions. Thankfully, I found the sport again many years later, and I've always loved this quote, that giving up on your dreams does not come for free, which is Chris Hadfield's wife. And found my way back into the marathon via triathlon, via experimenting with other things, learning to swim, picking up the bike, having my 2 beautiful children. My first marathon that I ever did, Oliver was 6 months old, and so I was nursing him at the finish line. And half the race I spent thinking, oh, I have to get back because he's never been without me this long, and he was okay. Go figure. So the reality is that research shows that focusing just on your goal will often come up short. So we need to focus on the process and the effort, and visualize the effort that it's going to take and the hard work that you need to do to achieve something, and not just the outcome. And that is even in like academic world of just focusing on what mark you want to get in something. You need to know how to break down the steps and have the micro goals and that sort of thing, but really be committed to the process. So I'm going to speed up. If we have Q&A later, if anyone wants to come back. That I think that I credit a lot of my comeback after 17 years is just learning how to be more process oriented and less fixated on the goal and the result, and being curious about, if you do the right things and you commit and you go through your day-to-day and do everything you need to do, being curious about what kind of outcome that'll bring and how good you can be, but not putting the pressure on yourself, for example, of a Boston qualifier. That's your dream. But if you do everything right, then you'll either get there or not, but you need to have fun in doing it, and you need to be curious about what you can do when you do things right. So I guess in short, thinking about how you can change your mindset. Like I said, having this idea of a growth mindset, being changing, not being so committed that you can't change courses along the way. So for me, it was a deviation into the Ironman triathlon world for a few years. There, we're done. I made it. So there's sort of my quick summary of 17 years, and I'd say like a lot of it was luck, a lot of it was great support from having so many people help me, but it was also just for me shifting how I viewed my own goals, and also accepting the fact that if I failed, that it was still going to be a success.
I get my own. Thanks, Melindy. Our final speaker this evening is Stephanie Brown. Stephanie is a local elite athlete. She enjoys many of the roads and trails that make Kelowna and the surrounding area such a great place to be active. This evening, she will share with us her story on being a former elite cyclist turned runner, a career woman working as a certified physical therapist, and a mom. And what Lacing Up for Life has given her as she explores these different but intertwined facets of life. So I am proud to introduce to you Stephanie Brown as she shares her story for Lacing Up for Life.
Thank you, Mel. It's an absolute pleasure to be here tonight speaking following these two ladies. I guess I'm emotional. A lot of what Melindy said, I would have really benefited from hearing when I was a lot younger about the process-oriented and all that. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight speaking with you all about my favorite thing, running. It's the best and it's the worst. It's many beautiful dichotomies, pleasure and pain, joy, and great suffering, which it has caused me. As I was preparing for this talk tonight, I was reminded of my early 20s when I would invariably call my dad in the various lows of injury and defeat, crying, and to which he would calmly listen and he would respond, "Peaks and valleys, Stephanie, peaks and valleys," in his very low voice. I was reminded of that because I just came off a great high, the most joyous victory of my life and the most meaningful. And I stand here tonight in a bit of a valley, and I'm climbing back out because I've been injured. And I hesitated whether to include this in my talk, but it actually ends up being that it's a great time to give a presentation because the purpose of what I do in physio and why I run has been reminded to me loud and clear. But first, what I'm talking about tonight is three things: running, family/community, and career. And this is a concept stolen from project management. The triangle conundrum suggests that you must choose two out of the three. And the more you slide towards one, it costs the others. And in my younger years, I thought that this is how it would be. I would do my running or my cycling career, and I had various delusions about speed skating and triathlon, which didn't go well. And then I would do my physio career, and for many years, I didn't think I would ever have a family. I thought I was too committed to my sport and to my career, and biologically, I didn't know, like the whole female athlete triad, it very much affected me. I didn't know if I could have kids, so I kind of thought it was never going to happen. But in reality, we solved the triangle problem with a Venn diagram. Very sciencey. And I didn't realize that eventually my Venn diagram would look a lot like this one on the left, where you can combine your running and your career a lot. And especially for me, you can combine your family with your running. So never would I have imagined that far into my career, when I had given up running a long time ago, actually competitively, that I would be competing again. And also that it would so heavily and very meaningfully involve my family. So an average racer, it might look like the right one, and you can pick and choose. And some people, they do choose one out of the two or two out of the three, and that is also fine. But I'm going to talk about all three and what got me here tonight, which was largely my career, which led me back to running after years. When my daughter, who's now 10 months old, just about, was 6 months, I made the goal of winning the Apple Marathon, which was just this past September, and or achieving a sub 3-hour marathon for my first. It was an incredibly difficult time. Embarking on that it was partially my husband's fault, because I was going to do it in 2025, but he convinced me, no, like, you're running good now, just do it now. And it was incredibly difficult. First of all, just the sleep deprivation of my daughter, waking me, or me waking, I was never sure, every 30 to 45 minutes to nurse, on top of working and managing the toddler and the baby at home, and then the marathon training. It was insane. And then I went through an unfortunate sequence of events midsummer, about 6 to 8 weeks out, where we were camping in the Kootenays, and I ended up with poison oak, like all here. And that further led to my sleep deprivation, like the worst itching you have ever imagined. And I went on prednisone, and the doctor thought it was shingles too. So I was on these medications. I ended up getting like a really bad cold. I was asking Cindy like one day after this race, like, should I do this training run the next day? And she's like, no, shorten it. So I did the training run anyway, and it was too long, and I ended up with this knee injury, which I have now, which was the cost of the immense joy of finishing that marathon first and finishing just over my 3-hour goal. But it was all worth it. It's just now been a very difficult month since then, and I'm still only running about 7 minutes in 1 minute bouts. So it's always a humbling time, but injury has given me as much as running itself, in that it led me to my career, and it's taught me so much. So this marathon journey actually began about 2 years ago, ish, when I had come to the realization that I was able to actually tolerate some mileage. And I found myself doing intervals, but I was really slow. So like no leg speed. And so I decided I would go back to the track. And I started telling anyone who would listen, yeah, I got a 5-year goal of getting back to my old PRs from when I was a teenager. And I'm still only 2 years in, so I've got some time still. But then I found out I was pregnant with my second child. So I did some research. I ran through my first pregnancy and it was fine, but I wasn't running hard, and I didn't want to give up this goal of going back to the track. So I found this study, which is very recent, like Melindy said, 10 years ago, there was nothing. This was 2022, it was published in 2023, so it must have been published just in time for me to read it. But I was very encouraged that this study, looking at 42 runners, a lot faster than me, who trained through their pregnancies, they actually were able to get back to about 80% of their pre-pregnancy training volume by 3 months postpartum. And it gave all the details of them training through their pregnancy. They did intervals, they cross-trained in increasing amounts, and most of them increased their running actually again in the 3rd trimester. Not an important detail. Anyway, I was encouraged. This and a couple other studies in HIIT training actually that looked at like the blood flow to the fetus and the temperature of the fetus. And then I generally felt well after the first couple weeks where I knew I was pregnant. Things got better. I was able to go to the track. I was still running faster times than I had before. Not like when you're pregnant, you can't really go your hardest because you can't go too anaerobic, but I trained fairly hard through the pregnancy. Given this info, I just had faith and I didn't worry about the baby because of everything I'd read, and women who had come before me and were challenging these norms that, no, we don't train and compete through pregnancy. So, what's next? Oh, there were lots of comments, of course, and opinions. And when I raced this mile, 7 months pregnant, my mom was there and she was supportive, but she was like, why are you doing this? But I think her being there, she started to understand it. And my husband and I both agreed that even if you're not running at your best, it was important to be out there, because I want to be an example for other young women that you don't have to choose sport or children or family, and also that you can train through pregnancy. Like for me, that enabled me to enjoy my pregnancy a lot more because I felt like myself. And my second pregnancy, I was stoked. I had goals. I was back to the track. This is a very old piece of paper. It's from 1999 when I was 11 or 12 years old. And if you look at the bottom, it says long LLS, which I put on all such important training documents that I pinned on my wall. Long live sport. So in my 12-year-old wisdom, that's what we're talking about today, partially. So I'm still this girl that pinned this on her wall. I'm still selfish, as we all know. To be a runner or an endurance athlete, you have to be a bit selfish. And now I accept that I'm not going to be as fast on this journey I've just begun to go back to the track and the marathon. I'm not going to be as fast as if I didn't have a family and a career. But I really want to lean on this point because it's very important, is your best is not your physiological best. Your best is not your physiological potential. No one reaches that anyway. Your best is your best in that moment and for the circumstance. And that's a very noble path to pursue. Whether you have 4 hours a week, you're in med school, or you have 14 and you're a professional athlete. It's the same path, and it's very worthwhile to pursue. When I was pregnant and I was trying to break 20 minutes in the 5K, it was just as meaningful as now when I'm trying to break 18. And it was just as fun, and I enjoyed it immensely. This will be a video. Oh, there it is. Most of my days are spent with my kids, as I see my clients in the evening, and so much of their days is spent with me training. And like any mom, I try to make it fun for them, but there can be some guilt in that, and even some shame. And I think it's important to say, sometimes, like when I'm talking to other moms, I downplay how much time we spend training, because I might feel like they're judging me. But my husband and I agree that there's nothing else we would rather have them doing with us. We want them to experience with us as we have these big goals, and we might not succeed, and they get to learn about grit, and they get to learn about hard work and committing yourself to something and making it your life. And when you fail, it's okay, and you're going to be back out there pushing the stroller on Monday. So it's been really challenging, but how do I play the video? Oh, this? Wait, which do I point at? Oh, no. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Can you fix it? So, I mean, in the interest of time, it's a very short video. We're at the track and trail. If you can get it, it would be great. We're at the track and trail on our holiday where I got the poison oak. And my son had watched us in this, and we have a heat wave every year in the Okanagan. So he had watched us in the heat wave, and he was running back and forth on the track probably 25 times, dunking his head, running and pressing a button on the track, and then returning to us and saying, "I need my bottle!" Because I guess my husband and I had said that at some point, like in our antics in between intervals and dunking our head. It's okay. I mean, it's just a very short video. I'm going to shift gears a little bit into my history and what led me to practice physio as I do today, in the beliefs and the mindset. Like I said, it's a good time to share this story with you because of the current injury situation, and I've been questioning everything, and there has been some serious doubt, especially just following the marathon. The knee was really bad. What I had going in, it was really bad from about 5K to the finish, and definitely after. So I really questioned, did I wreck my knee? Do I need surgery? All the things that I'm sure my clients go through. I had to really question myself. And I told myself what I would tell my clients. Like, no, you did not wreck yourself. You're not broken. We have a great capacity to heal, both our tissues, but more importantly, as I've learned, is our nervous system to desensitize once you give it the rest, the sleep, the everything that really went during my marathon training because of the kids and the balancing everything. Give your nervous system what it needs. In physio, a lot of the time, we're just teaching our bodies to compensate better. We're adding strength elsewhere where there's a perpetual weakness. So, unfortunately, so it seems unrelated, but in my history, it was a gift and a curse. I was extremely driven, hence my 11-year-old self writing her workouts on the wall and saying, if you want something really bad, do it every night. So, geez, losing my train. So I was self-coached. This is my training log from 2004 to 2005, which my mom recently sent me. I was self-coached, and I eventually got myself to a point where I had a running scholarship at the University of Utah. I was quite a good middle distance runner, but I was a mess. I did not sleep well. I would wake in the night. I had these cortisol spikes, which I know about now. I definitely lost my period for long periods of time. I had no idea about fueling around training, and I did end up with many bone stress injuries, as these other ladies were talking about as well. We're going to fast forward through that. I had a really rough NCAA career, switched sports, and to road cycling. And what led me on was that I was going to help others not go through what I went through. Only I had this back injury, and after physio school, I still wasn't better. And I continued, I got strong, I did my mobility, I had a super strong core, and I still was dealing with this issue. And it wasn't until I came to understand what we talk about in physio as pain science that I was able to actually overcome this. And this is what has got me here tonight in restarting my running career, is I learned that it's okay to have a sensation where you once had pain. So I always had this left foot injury, left foot bone stress injury. I always had this pain in my foot, and it's still there, but I keep an eye on it. And I know that it's just a sensation. It's okay. It never really gets any worse. I learned that pain is perception of a threat in your nervous system. It's not actually necessarily damage. Pain does not equal damage, and sensation is okay. And knowing this, I've been able to come back from all of my old injuries, and this is what I work on with my clients every day. Thank you. Runners, know your purpose, enjoy your failures and your setbacks, and you'll come back stronger for them. Keep showing up year after year, because it's a worthy pursuit, and do your best in that moment. Long live sport.
So thank you to these three women for sharing what lacing up for life has meant to them. This thread that is part of our foundation that allows us to go after dreams, stay humble to the lessons learned, and continue to explore. When we think we know the way, only to realize that, maybe things have shifted and we need to adapt. Thank you to these women for sharing their stories on how they laced up for life, allowing them to explore, accept challenges, and go for it. At this time, I would like to now open up the floor to questions.